Kara Zor-El escapes the dying planet of Krypton. She is delayed on her way to Earth. When she gets here 24 years later, she becomes Earth's newest hero, Supergirl. Welcome to the Krypton Report, a Supergirl podcast brought to you by Southgate Media. I am your host, Tyler Patrick. You can find me at JTYPatrick on Twitter. So let's get started on what's going on today in the world of the Kryptonians.
Welcome, Kryptonian fans, to another episode of Last Krypton, the Supergirl podcast. Today I have a special guest. You might recognize his voice from all his multiple shows here on Southgate Media. I'll let him tell you all about that. But I want to welcome Mr. Phil Parrish.
Alright, so I'm recording this as I'm driving. Got the podcast recorder out just because I'm extremely excited. I couldn't wait to talk about this. Just read that they have cast one of the Man of Steel, Mr. Dean Cain, Lois and Clark Superman, to be on Supergirl, as well as the original Kara Zor-El from the 82? I can't remember. I need to go and I'll edit this out. And the original Kara Zor-El from the Supergirl film, Helen Slater. Now, this is awesome news just because not only do I enjoy those actors and what they brought to their individual elements from the individual series to the characters, but Superman-based television shows have had a history of respecting the universe. It dates back to Superman the movie had the original serial's Superman, Kirk Allen, as Lois Lane's father in a quick scene on the train, as well as Neil O'Neill, the original Lois Lane, as her mother. Now, when you get into Lois and Clark, the TV series, original Jimmy Olsen, Jack Larson appeared on an episode, so did Phyllis Coates, the Lois Lane from the serials. When you get into Smallville, Smallville played a huge tribute to the Superman mythos by having not only Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, Dean Cain, Terrence Stamp, Terry Hatcher, and Helen Slater all appear in the series, and Mark McClure. Don't want to forget anyone. So we have two different Superman, Supergirl, two Lois Lanes, a Jimmy Olsen, and a Zod all appear in Smallville. So the tradition of passing down the torch and bringing in actors who had previously been in a series before is still strong in Supergirl, and that makes me happy. So I'm really excited. I wonder who they're going to be. Because we know they cast Supergirl's mother already, so I wonder who Helen Slater might play, and I wonder more who Dean Cain might play. So it's exciting. It's exciting. I'm a big Superman fan and Supergirl. I love my Kryptonians. So to see this it just makes me very happy. But let's get on with today's show, and just want to throw this out there for everybody. If you get a chance, leave us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think of the show so we can improve. Alright? You can also hit us up on Twitter at LastDaughterPod. So we changed the name up, make it a little easier. So, on with the show. Feeling without her powers, without having to use kryptonite. Someone that could be strong, could be anything. Could be, adapting other people's voices, adapting their skills. So it's definitely my choice for a villain. So we'll see what the rest of the hosts have to say when we bring it up to them a later date.
Phil, hi, it's great to be here. It's great to talk to you, Tyler. I never get to speak to you. I know, it's like wow, we never get to talk. It's crazy how this works out. But before we get started in this week's discussion, what are your thoughts going through your head right now with the upcoming Supergirl series?
Probably with a lot of these shows, I'm hoping for the best, but I'm scared.
Yeah, which is
because I don't know. It's just a lot of times I don't know. It depends writing it a female character. It doesn't matter if it's a male or female character. I once in a while that stick source material close thinking and their favorite thing.
Yeah. Has any of the casting jumped out at you yet?
Not really, but just because, except for Kane and Helen Slater and that, I mean, like the main characters, I'm not familiar with those actors. Pop out.
Yeah. I hear you. We always like to have the honest opinions of our fellow nerdcasters.
But I kind of like that sometimes with the superhero show. Like if I don't know the actors.
Paid off with Flash, I'll tell you that's for sure.
Like, and Arrow, because you get too big a name, and it's just like
you don't see the character.
Exactly.
Hence Ryan Reynolds is Green Lantern, but that's another day to discuss. But now another question I have to ask all my guests: what is a villain that you think would appear on Supergirl? Like, considering we discussed it as being part of the Flash Arrow universe, what is a villain do you think you'd like to see appear in the Supergirl show?
We have to. You think you'd have to have somebody pretty either smart or powerful, just to for Krypton, somebody to challenge that power level. I don't know. Do you think she needs her own version of Lex? Or?
You know what? We have a theory going about that. We mentioned in the earlier episode that her sister's name is Alexandria. And that's kind of an interesting name for picking something for your sister, for a character. One that I was thinking of when I was watching Superman the animated series and Batman the animated was Livewire.
There you go.
I thought that'd be kind of cool. It's a female villain. She fought Superman and then she fought Supergirl in that Supergirl Batgirl crossover episode. So I thought that could be a really unique and different kind of character to come onto the show and just take care of some Supergirl business.
It'd be nice to see like a Harley Quinn or something. I'll never put her on.
Yeah, because now they won't even use her for Arrow. Even though we got that nice little tease, they won't even let that come back into play anywhere. So just for the Joker. But even because isn't her name the first name is it Delia? Isn't like Delia dead? Was the original Joker's daughter or something?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. I'm like 2-1.
I think, but like her last name was dead, but I don't think she had any relation to Harvey, which is a completely stupid idea for naming.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember the origin of the one. I think she had nothing with any of them in her mind.
Yeah, she was crazy, go figure. But she's just an obsessed fan who found Joker's face and decided to wear it. It's really creepy. But alright, enough of that. So moving on, happier thing. In this week's episode, we had discussed before the casting of Hank Henshaw. It's going to be on the show. And in the show, Hank is a government agent for a department that was made up for the show. I don't know why he could be part of Argus, keep that going, but whatever. Something, I have it here in my notes somewhere. Hold on. And maybe not. But anyways, it's some new department about watching humans with powers. And so what we're talking about today is where the character comes from, his importance, and where it could lead. So, Phil, are you familiar with Mr. Hank Henshaw?
Yes, I am. I read his origin last week.
Oh, excuse me. Getting over a little bit of cold, I apologize. Why don't you fill in the listeners about his origins?
Well, I think he appeared for pages 4, the first full appearance was the Adventures of Superman 466, I believe.
Yep.
Him, his wife, and 2 other astronauts went up into space. So there's 4 of them. They get hit with green radiation, and when they crash right back to Earth, they come back down with fantastic powers.
Maybe this is what Josh Trank is making.
And basically, the powers they killed them too, went crazy. Henshaw looked like he was dying with rotting for everyone's eyes, but then he found he put his mind conscious of different mechanical and technological things, and eventually he found Superman, the ship that brought Superman to Earth, created a little vest for himself, and his consciousness down into space.
Only in a comic book.
Until he went crazy and became happy.
Which is the big place that we're going to touch on, because I think that's where everyone knows him from. Like when you hear Hank Henshaw, I think it was really cool the fact that they brought that character back in some way. But when everyone thinks of Henshaw, the first thing they think of, probably even the only thing they think of, is Cyborg Superman. Now, during the time when they killed Superman in the comics, the death of the Superman, they had 4 different ways and ideas to bring him back, and they did all 4 different variations. One was the Cyborg Superman that most people believed was the real Superman, because all the cybernetic parts represented parts that were heavily damaged in Superman's battle with Doomsday.
Plus, I think they said the owl was Krypton.
Yes. You know, you had Superboy the clone, the Eradicator, which was like some sort of protoplasmic entity.
Yeah, he was like an energy being and kind of created a body, you know, that looked exactly like Superman. So.
And then, of course, the last one was Sweet Steel, John Henry Irons. But what's interesting is you get the Hank Henshaw comes back, and he thinks he blames Superman for the death of his wife, and you find out he becomes the villain. See, you can solve Hank Henshaw. He's like, no one should blame Superman for anything. But Henshaw turned out to be the villain, basically, of the entire death of Superman. He kills the Eradicator. I think he throws him into the sun, doesn't he?
The Eradicator? Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have Superboy and Steel, and then the real Superman comes back, and they're all forced to fight Henshaw. The only learn that Henshaw is actually in league with who? Mongol. It was all a plan for Mongol. You know, it's very easy to find Reign of the Superman comics. You can find them at some shops for 10 cents, 25 cents. Specials.
They have a trade.
It's a very interesting, it's a very good story. Now, Henshaw appears in the New 52 as an advanced prosthetics researcher, and he's working on a reactivation of a program for androids called Spartan. The cybernetic Superman is not connected to Henshaw in the New 52. The New 52 Cyber Superman was. I'm not telling you because it's an extremely awesome story, and I don't want to spoil it, even though I'll probably end up spoiling it later in another cast of this show when I talk about Terra and the New 52.
Well, so you know the origin of the New 52 Cyborg Superman?
Yes, I do.
So do you think maybe the show can Hank Henshaw as a red herring and then reveal, and then they'll have a Cyborg Superman whose origin more like the 52 Cyborg?
We're getting there. And the last was, if you read Smallville Season 11, Henshaw is introduced as an astronaut pilot with his wife that is going into space, and there's an accident that you find out is actually set by Luthor in an attempt to spray out a radiation that will cover Superman so that Luthor can track his actions around the world. Henshaw gets third-degree burns, and Dr. Neil Hamilton tries to treat him, but he ends up going through experimental tests and having his consciousness transferred into a drone by Lex. Sounds like kind of like the Metallo from the animated series. And then, Superman stops him and gets Henshaw to actually stay in Star Labs and let Hamilton assist him. So it's an interesting take on the character. But here's like what Phil was just saying. They bring in Hank Henshaw, and I wonder in some ways they just bring him in for a namesake. Like, hey, here's this character from the comics. You know the name because he's African American now, which is fine, except he can't really be Cyborg Superman. Like, it's a dead giveaway, he's not really Superman.
Well, that was my other question too. Is they really can't call him Cyborg Superman? They don't have Superman.
Maybe
They call himself Superman.
They put out a cast list for a man to be Superman, and they're gonna shoot and film it. And my prediction is they're gonna do something kind of like if anyone has ever watched Birds of Prey, when they do these flashback cutscenes of Batman and Catwoman where you really can't focus and see them, they're gonna do something because it threw me for a loop. Because my prediction was I thought that this Supergirl that we were gonna get was gonna be like this amalgam type where her story is going to be more mirrored like the story of Superman, and she would be like the Superman of this world. There wouldn't be Cal. We would just have Supergirl. I thought that was kind of a bold move because I think there's certain characters that it's hard to do without the ones that kind of create them, such as like you couldn't really do Nightwing without Batman or some sort of Batman references. Because if you did, I feel like you're losing part of the core of who Nightwing is. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. That's always tricky. Like, you mentioned Superman, not, it's like the origin kind of funky, addictive, like, where's Spider-Man?
Exactly. I mean, this is supposed to connect with the Flash Arrow universe. We've never heard of Superman. I'm pretty sure that would be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that was my other question. How around that.
So, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. It's still so much speculating. But I'm interested to see how Henshaw plays out. But part of me, like I said, feels that he's just like a name. Like, we need a character from the comics. Just use Henshaw and we'll rewrite his story, just so they feel like they have someone to identify with. So, I don't know. So much of his core story involved the space program, which they could still do. But I don't know. We'll see where it plays out. I mean,
I think the problem is, I don't know, Supergirl has like really a lot of rogues of her own.
I found some, and we're going to get into that in a later discussion about some of the characters I think really reflect hard on Supergirl. But at the same time, I think majority of her villains are villains from others. In the same way, I think that Arrow has been criticized for some of the villains that he goes up against. People have said have been more Batman villains, and some yes, some no. Rachel, what? But like I said, I think there should be some villains that are really cool to see what they do with them, like Livewire. They brought her in. Would be a cool person to have. But what are any final thoughts, Ben, on Supergirl and Mr. Henshaw?
No, just eager to see what they do.
All right. Well, you heard it first here that Phil is eager to see what happens, and we're not really sure who Supergirl is going to fight after she fights Lumberjack. So, anything you want to plug or say, Phil, before we say goodbye to the listeners today?
Well, like Tyler said, I'm on a lot of shows. I'm on Before the Bat, which is a Gotham podcast with Tyler himself, Ellie.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler and I also do World's Finest, which if you subscribe to the show, you get. And I'm also on 2 Marvel shows, Marvel Review and Super Connectivity with Marvel Master himself, Charlie Esser.
Phil's all over.
Yes. If any comic book questions, DC, Marvel, whatever, get a hold of nightme@gmail.com, or I am on Twitter @nightmanpdb.
All right, Phil. Well, thanks for being here today with us. We'll look forward to talking to you again in a future episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Krypton Report, the Supergirl podcast. Hit us up on Twitter @Krypton Report. Leave us a review on iTunes and let you know what you think, how the show can be better, your thoughts on Supergirl, and anything else you feel like chatting about. And I'll catch you next week.